Hello everybody and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Deborah Hatswell and you're listening to BBR Investigations. Tonight's episode of the podcast will centre around British reports of British Gugwe or Gug-Wose. Gugwe, from what I can gather, after a very small amount of research into the subject, tends to look like a baboon or a bear mixed with a dog, something with a short, snouted face. They're often seen down on all fours, in a gorilla stance, and they're thickly muscled and are described as being aggressive to humans and other cryptids. It's said they only eat meat and will take any animal that crosses their path. In most of the sources I checked, the Gugwe also have large canine teeth and are more animal in appearance than what we would class as a British Bigfoot or a Woodwose. The creature I saw had no canines. I remember flat teeth like a human. But I'd taken lots of reports that mentioned these characteristics. Many months ago, I took a report from a man in Wales who was saved by a creature he could not name by a clan of Bigfoot after a wild camping trip that went horribly wrong. I wondered then if the creature that wanted to attack him would have a dog or baboon-like face. It's just a hunch of mine after years of research. But over the last several months, I'm hearing more reports that fit with that facial description. A snouted animal with a snout that doesn't look like a German Shepherd. This snout is more baboon or bear-like, whilst also maintaining its canine features. As serendipity goes, my good friend and fellow researcher Glassy Gleamer asked me if we had any reports here in the UK that would fit with the Gugwe description. He raised the question after an experience he'd had with what he described as a Gug-Wose, and that description hit home for me. Do we have any reports in the UK that would cover a creature that has a bear or baboon-like face, that are seen up on two legs or down on all fours, often in a gorilla-like stance? The answer is yes, we do. So let's hear a recent experience with a possible Gug-Wose, and then we can look at other reports that may just fit the bill, including a new, never made public before account from Cannock Chase. The Beast of Cops Corner. Now, this report comes from Glassy Gleamer and team, and he says, Deb, thanks for mentioning the baboon-like creature that was seen in Thetford. I didn't know about that case, and the reason I was interested in is that a group of friends and myself have been researching Wicken Woods and cheese cops around the Silverstone race circuit. In America, the Gugwe sightings seem to occur down the centre of the country, not on the east or the west coast. I didn't know we had this variety in the UK. I find it strange we do, to be honest. These Gugwe baboon types in the US, and probably here too, can be misidentified for a bearman or a short-muzzled dogman. I just wanted to ask you if there are any more sightings of these types I may be unaware of, as I'm interested in these. He said, I had an experience at Cheese Cops, and I'm calling it the Beast of Cheese Cops Corner. I called it a Gug-Wose, as it appears to look like the American Gugwe, a muzzled Bigfoot, like the Beast of Seven Shoots. So it was on the 29th of January 2022 when Steve and a number of investigators went out to Cops Corner, which is near Towchester. He said, myself and another BBR researcher were walking down a long straight trail that cuts through Cheese Cops and leads to the back of Cops Corner grandstand on the Silverstone race circuit. When we were all about halfway up this trail, we passed a strange branch or stick that was broken, and it was laying horizontally over the trail. And as we chatted, walking towards the race circuit, I kept thinking about this stick. And even though we weren't really researching, we were just trail walking and chatting, I thought, I'm going to go back and look there. And on the way back, I did. As my hunch was, I felt if this wasn't just a random stick that a dog had dropped or something that could have been placed there simply to slow people down as they walk around. so that something to the side of the trail would have more time to eyeball who was actually walking. At least that was my intuition. And because I couldn't stop thinking about it, I sensed I was onto something. I resolved I'd go and check it out on the journey back. I checked to the left of us and saw nothing. Then I checked to the right and I saw this rough tree structure. I didn't see anything in the crude structure of the tree and the branches until I caught movement, when this dark figure let up from where it was in the branches and darted off to my left. One of the things that stood out to me the most was the stance of this thing. It was like the shoulder and arm was straight out behind it horizontally, a little bit over a horizontal branch. I think it was leant forward, almost going to all fours. Its head was tucked down, and the rest of it was just motion blur. The only thing you could tell was it was a humanoid figure, hauling butt at an unholy speed. I cautiously pursued it in until it stopped between two more crudely structured up trees. I could tell this was a bit of a spot, and I waited quietly there, trying to pinpoint where it was. I was listening intently. The land lipped down to the left into a small valley, and then it rose higher on the other side with some sort of shed that was visible through the trees ahead. To the right of me, it was wooded, and behind me also. The trails where I'd come from were wooded. It was mildly windy. I then looked around. I bent down to check for tracks in the leaf ball in the roughly circular area which was in between the two crude structures. And something small got thrown near me from the valley on 4 separate occasions. Well, that's how it sounded. I flinched each time, bracing myself in case I was hit. Although in hindsight, I don't think that was the intention. Also, the missiles were too small to see, but I could hear them. And although I was studying where the land rose on the other side of the valley to determine the source of where they were coming from, in hindsight, I think it was coming from the bottom of the valley, below my eyesight. Then my fellow researcher appeared. He thought he saw a heat signature on his blur. He wanted to go back to the trail, and we concluded it wasn't the season for stuff to be dropping from trees, not at the end of January. I don't know if this creature is a Gug-Wose or a normal Woodwose, but Cheese Copse is very close to Wicken Wood, where there has been a muzzled-faced wose encounter. I simply didn't get a good look enough at its face. I think my fellow researchers joining me appeared to have halted the throwing of any missiles. I think when he turned up, whatever it was throwing stopped. It sounded like small stones or twigs or acorns, only something small. I had a few of these unholy speed moment blur encounters now, and I would say the optimal chance to get a good view is when they start to jump or when they first set off before they reach maximum speed. This is a very small window to get that snapshot in your mind, as when they're moving at speed, your eyes just cannot keep up with them. If I'd been on my own, I would have stayed and continued to annoy this creature to see if I could force a better sighting out of it, you know. Then he sends me a second report and it says, Encounter report, Wicken Woods, possible Gug-Wose, date 20th of September 2022. Previously in March this year, I'd visited with the same researcher, and a funny thing had happened as I diverted from the trail to check out the inside of this stretch of tall trees. The funny thing was, the researcher said he panicked when I disappeared. He tried to use the blur binoculars to find me, which should have been a doddle, as I wasn't that far in, so it must be really decent camouflage. He couldn't locate me. 6 months later, I suggested to another friend that we went for a walk in Wicken Woods, as we chose a spot to walk her Irish wolfhound. She was happy to comply and follow me into the same stretch off the trail into the tall trees previously mentioned. We spent a little time there being observant, and then exited onto the trail back to the car. We were chatting away, and as we got to an intersection, I began to hear something, and then I hushed my friend in mid-sentence, and I think she caught the end of it too. What I heard is this weird mumbling sound, and it was swooping in on us, as if it had come from a hole in the air, like something muttering to themselves, though not in a hushed way. The mumbling stopped, but the direction of travel continued, and I could hear it moving around us, and it was circling us stealthily. I could hear it brushing the tall grass until it was directly behind us. And then we exited the straight trail back to the car. I then quizzed my friend on what she heard before I told her what I picked up, so as not to influence her. And she said it felt like we connected with something in the pine tree area. There was a feeling, a real presence of something being there. I felt like it had hooked onto us, like it had latched onto us, and it wouldn't let go. And as we walked more towards the gate, it got even more embedded. She said, I heard some bird noise and then a really low-pitched drone sound of talking, as if people were mumbling against themselves. I felt as if they stayed with us until we got down to the gate. These are the same woods that a hunter had an encounter with when sitting in his deer stand of a muzzled deer. That case, the case that Gigi's just mentioned, is a private case, so I cannot share the detail of it. But I will say the creature fits very well with whatever it was running away from the tree structure. I have even heard a report in France where two women were out walking with one of the lady's dogs when they saw a creature running away from them in the forest. She described the use of its elbows as being like a speed skater. As it moved away, it was very fast, and it was also thickly muscled, dark in colour, and did not resemble a human. Glassy mentioned it was a case in Thetford Forest that made him wonder if I'd taken any other reports of a baboon or a short-snouted creature that could possibly fit the Gug-Wose description. And there are two cases at Thetford that fit with this kind of creature. The first one being the Eildon baboon, happened in 19th of May 2011. A lorry driver whose route took him through Thetford Forest reported seeing a hairy, light grey coloured creature which was walking down on all fours, moving through the grass around 90 metres away from him. The driver could see the creature clearly. He said that it had forward-facing eyes, a snout, and upright ears on its head. The creature then stood up on its hind legs and approached the driver. It was moving like an ape would, before it then dropped down once again onto all fours, and it was last seen running off, peering over its shoulder as it left. There is another report at Thetford that is just one of the many strange creature cases that have been reported in the area. This time the creature was seen on the A1075, and it's a case being worked on by my friend and fellow researcher, Edward Oliver. Edward said, the sighting of the Thetford wild shaggy man happened in 1988, and it was on the A1075. The sighting comes from an unnamed witness who saw a strange, upright, two-legged figure while driving along the road between Thetford and East Wretham. This strange, shaggy-haired figure was mistakenly thought by the witness to be an escaped zoo animal on first encountering it, but they soon changed their mind. The witness was driving home from the direction of Watton towards Thetford on the A1075 when they saw something very strange that stood out as unusual due to its size and the fact that it was covered in hair. Whatever it was walking on all fours, and the witnesses likened it to something like a massive dog. It had grey and white hair, small ears, a face with a short snout, and big eyes. The witness drove past the mysterious creature to get a better look, at which point it stood up on its hind legs, erect and bipedal, like a man, but it was far bigger in build than any human. The witness then said it was human-like in shape and was around 7 feet tall. I was so scared I just drove away quickly. Wanting to know more though, the driver finally went back to the spot a few days later to try and explain away the creature, or to see if they could get a hang on what they saw that day. In the area the creature was spotted in, there were some drag marks on the ground, as if something had been pulled along. The witness wondered what this was a sign of, had the creature been eaten at the time that he saw it? Had it dragged its prey away when it had been disturbed by him? and the creature was described as having a short snout. I've had a new report come in from Cannock Chase from a lady who visited there with a boyfriend in the 1990s that could fit with this Gug-Wose description, as it also had a snouted creature, and this creature grinned at her. Hiya Deb, I'd like to report a sighting to you that happened some years ago now. I came across you in your YouTube channel a few years back when I'd been having a sudden urge to look into something that I'd witnessed when I was 17. I'm 35 now. When this happened, I was with my first boyfriend at the time in his car, which was a little silver Corsa. We were driving down one of the roads through the Chase on our way back home. We used to go out for a drive, walk around the Chase every week or so. Sometimes with a few other friends in their cars, or sometimes alone, as a young couple in love do. If we went up there for some alone time, it was usually mostly at night. So anyway, late one night, we're driving back home down one of the long 50-mile-an-hour roads that cuts through the Chase. It was clear, and it was a quiet night. There were no other cars on the road other than us. Then all of a sudden, what seemed to have come from nowhere was this creepy, ugly, hairy-looking creature, and it was standing in the middle of the road, in front of the car, and it was staring at us. My boyfriend had to slam on the brakes to avoid ploughing into it. He stopped millimetres away from it, and it didn't move an inch. It just stood right there in the headlights, staring at us for what felt like ages. As we both just sat there frozen. In reality, it must have been about 15, 20 seconds. And it just stood there, upright on its hind legs. And then it got weirder. When the creature grinned at us, it just grinned before walking over to the other side of the road and disappearing into the bushes. And it was at that moment me and my boyfriend spoke. He turned to me and said, what was that? And I said, I don't know, but it looks like the offspring of a monkey that's been with a fox. I'm so glad the bonnet of the car was in between us and we were in it that night. She said, after doing some digging and listening to your reports, I came to the realisation and the certainty that A, there would have been others that had seen this dogman creature too, or something similar. B, that there is so much more living out there in our forests and green corridors and waterways than we even realise. And C, the governments, military and police must know a lot more about these creatures. And it seems that they've been withholding this information from the public for a long time. You got me thinking though, Deb. Why did it just not wait until the car had gone by and we wouldn't have seen it? Why did it step out into the road or appear in front of the car? I think it wanted to be seen. And why the grin? Have you had any reports of other cryptids grinning or smiling? I've had a few paranormal things happen to me throughout life, especially when I was younger, and I'm sure that comes from my mum. Our witness mentioned a grinning creature, and that rang a bell for me, as I've heard it several times before. One very recent case in the northeast of England featured a wolf-like creature moving at speed up on two legs. He was around 8 feet tall, thickly muscled, and for all it appeared a canine, the snout was not long or elongated. The creature stood so close to the witness she could see the skin beneath his hair, and he slowly lowered his head and looked at her, and then curled his lip in a grin before taking off into the woods. I know an account at Cannock Chase that is almost a facsimile of the report from the young couple in their car that happened in 1986. This time, it was also a young couple sitting in their car when they were confronted by a horrifying beast, described as, I can't really find the right words to describe whatever this thing was that we were seeing. It appeared that it was like a dog, and the body on this thing was huge for a domestic dog. And for all it looked massive, it also looked pretty sick. It was covered with patchy grey fur. It wasn't sleek or well cared for, but all matted and knotted. And as I said at first, I thought it was a massive dog, and I still did, until it raised up onto two legs. It was like a hyena, but grey in colour. And although this meeting took only 30 seconds or so, it's imprinted on our minds, and even now I have no idea what I saw that night, where it went to, or even if it's still out there. The baring of the teeth or the smile that people mention intrigues me. It's not really something that a canine creature would do. Is the creature snarling in a show of strength, or simply smiling for a reason we don't understand? There's one case I can think of where the creature made certain to show its canine fangs to the terrified victim. This happened to a young man who lives less than 5 miles from me. He contacted me in 2021 to discuss this awful encounter, and he was around 7 years old when it took place. It happened in an area called Hunger Hill. Now, the witness wanted to know where my encounter happened and how old I was at the time. So I explained I was 15 and my experience happened in Salford, which is 1 or 2 towns over from where he lived. He then went on to explain that he'd also seen something he was struggling with when he was much younger. His experience instantly reminded me of a number of reports I've taken over the years from people who shared their experience of seeing something that was gorilla-like when they were children. All of these child witnesses describe an ape-like creature. They all lived in new-build homes situated on the edge of greenbelt land, and they all saw the creature through the window. Our witness from Hunger Hill makes it clear that he does not feel what he saw was a Bigfoot. He describes something with the appearance of a gorilla. He's not alone in this. Many of our witnesses report ape or gorilla-like creatures. They are often described as being down on all fours in that typical gorilla stance, which I now realise is also a characteristic of the Gugwe. One witness named Tony, who saw a reddish-coloured creature a few miles away from my experience, described the creature as standing on its knuckles like an ape would do. Another report says, "Hi Deborah, I heard you speaking about your encounter on YouTube. I got in touch because I saw something strange not too far away when I was a kid. The experience I had was very much up close and personal. I could not mistake what I was seeing or mix it up with anything else. When people describe Bigfoot type creatures, there's a similarity, I suppose, to what I saw, but I'm exactly sure that it wasn't a Bigfoot because it looked like a gorilla. I was around 7 years old when it happened. I lived in Hunger Hill. The house we lived on was close to the M6 motorway. My bedroom window was facing the main road, looking out towards the roundabout. On the day this happened, I was in my bedroom, standing, looking out the window, and I saw something I couldn't understand. There was something in the garden, and from what I could see, I could only describe this thing as being very ape-like. It was very much similar to a silverback gorilla. It ran across a very small grass area and easily hopped over the front fence and proceeded to climb my drain pipe, and it was coming up towards my room. I took a few steps back in shock at this, and this thing reached my window, and it kept looking at me, and it was hanging onto the drain pipe while grinning. It was showing me all its teeth. It just kept looking at me, and I could see the teeth were pretty big, and the fangs were like canines. They were a lot larger than the others. I was just so shocked, traumatised. I couldn't move or run away. I was just frozen to the spot looking at it, and it was almost smiling at me, grinning. I can't really describe the expression. I remember regaining myself and being able to move finally, and I ran downstairs and told my mum and dad about what I'd seen. I basically told them there's an ape at my bedroom window and it's baring its teeth. I asked my dad if he would come upstairs with me and see it for himself, which, if I remember correctly, I don't think they ever did. I've always remembered that experience, and I've had others, but nothing relating to a Bigfoot or anything like that. To what I know and believe, I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't imagining it. It definitely happened, and I know it sounds crazy, but this was real. I've always remembered that day and what happened, and I've never had any sort of experience with a Bigfoot before or since or whatever it was. I would say it was more like an actual ape than a Bigfoot. I don't know what to call it. I can describe it though. It was very black in colour, and the hair almost had a silver sheen to it. It must have been about 3 or 2 foot away from it when it came up the drain pipe. I saw this thing clearly. I was looking straight at it. I could make out so much detail. I can remember it was like just yesterday. I know it's a long time ago, but it's never left my mind. I always wondered what it was that I saw that day. He added, "It's pretty hard to talk to people about what happened because I know how it sounds. This thing was definitely, from what I can say to my knowledge, like a silverback gorilla. I saw it run across the grass and it was moving very fast towards the fence. It moved with a sway and it had long arms that were muscular. I always think back to that time and I start doubting myself, but I know exactly what I saw and it's never really left me. I can remember everything about it, just the whole sequence that happened. It's really ingrained in my memory. I've done countless hours of research about Bigfoot across the globe, but the general description doesn't seem to match to exactly what I saw. I mean, this thing was down on all fours. It wasn't walking on its back legs. It was swaying like how a gorilla moves. If I had to guess height, I'd say it did stand maybe up straight. It would have been about 6 or 7 feet tall. It was pretty large, but it was also more bulky and stocky. I could see its muscular formation from where the grass patch was in front of the house. I would say the thing I saw had a kind of thick, black, greyish hair that seemed to have a sheen to it, and it was in the shape of, say, a really short buzz cut, but with very long, spiky hair, if you know what I mean. It was very characteristic of an actual silverback face and teeth. The teeth seemed very large, and it seemed to have quite a large head. It was climbing up quickly. I would say from the moment I spotted it to the moment it climbed the drain pipe must have been under 10 seconds, maybe even 7 at the most. And it was up at my window, peering through at me a while. I stood there traumatised. It makes me wonder what the hell these things are and what's going on exactly. After reading this, Deb, do you have anyone who's had any sort of similar experience to mine at all? I hopefully would like to get some sort of clarification into what it could have been or what it was. I was able to tell him about a case I'd worked in the Springwell area after I was contacted by a gentleman who said something really similar happened to him when he was much younger, that up until now he'd had no explanation for, as he'd seen a hairy gorilla and it was a creature in an English garden. He was in his early teens and he was staying at his grandparents' house at the time. And he said, "When I was younger, 12 or 13 years old, I'd sleep at my grandparents a lot during the weekends and school holidays. And one night, when I was staying over and I saw something really strange, I saw what looked like a creature with a gorilla's head peeking out from behind a tree in the garden and looking through the trees outside my window. I think it was watching me in bed, and I remember being so scared. I hid under the covers for the rest of the night. I was worried that this gorilla would climb up the drain pipe and get in the window and get me. If I had to describe it, I would say the face kind of just looked like a gorilla, with not much hair on the face. This thing had a short, stubby nose, massive eyes that looked black, but it was dark, so I'm not sure if there was any colour to them in a different light. The hair around the face and head looked dark, maybe brown or black. I only really saw the head peeping round the tree before I quickly made sense of what was happening and hid. In 2006, there was a case in Banchory, Scotland, where a couple of people in the same car saw what they described as a gorilla-like creature. The encounter was reported to the Fortean Society by a gentleman who was friendly with a lady in the group, and he said, "A friend of mine told me a story recently. While she was out with friends at the back end of midnight, driving through the back roads near Banchory, she and another person saw something cross the road in front of their car, and the only description she could give was that it was a gorilla. Now, this is the most level-headed person I know, and some would say over-skeptical, but she sticks to her story to this day. Close to this area, around the same time, a car with 4 males was chased by a hairy creature that came out of the woods and ran after them. 2 forestry workers also reported seeing a dark, hairy creature in the area. Add into these accounts all the other reports that could possibly fit the description of a hairy, thickly muscled, non-Bigfoot creature, seen down on all fours, also up on 2 legs, and the list would be quite comprehensive. Immediately, I think of the Bolam Beast, who chased a number of men through the woods in the Bolam Lake area. Or Ian's case in Wanstead, he was out with a group of friends when they all saw a creature that fits the same description. It bared its canines at them and watched them angrily from the tree line for what seemed like hours. In our last case tonight, we go across to Kent, and there's a case there which also mentions a creature that could fit the description of a Gug-Wose. And it's an unusual story from Great Chart, and it happened in 1858. On Saturday evening, a person in the employ of Mr. E. Greenhill of Bucksfold Farm, Great Chart, was startled by the sudden apparition of what appeared to him to be an extraordinary kind of animal resembling a large baboon in one of his employer's wheat fields, but whose name and nature were utterly incomprehensible to him. Not knowing indeed whether it might not be certain unmentionable personages in boldly shaped, I think he's trying to say it was something from the devil, its appearance had the effect of utterly scattering his senses, and when he collected them enough, he made a speedy retreat. Once the affair became known, it was then reported that several big men from Great Chart were well armed, and they made a search in the fields, but they didn't succeed in catching the animal, whatever it might be, while one party probably inclining to the superstition of the thing being satanic. Others took a horse and cart and went to Ashford in order to bring back aid. Now, come and help us. Their intention was to catch the monkey, and to take it into custody. So it said that they couldn't find it, but a month later it re-emerged, and this mysterious creature is said to have turned up here again, a little girl having seen it on Tuesday near Newgate Wood, and although greatly frightened, she retains sufficient self-possession to be enabled afterwards to describe it. Some flowery language this, isn't it? Since then, more than one burly individual in the parish has acknowledged to having been startled from his property by a glimpse of it. One who was going to count some sheep, having left his job, made the best of his home afterwards. The children of the National School had a holiday, and with a number of the inhabitants joined in a general hunting of the woods. But when the wanted creature was not seen, it died down. And although it considered that the thick undergrowth prevented such careful search as it was desirable, I think if you cut underneath all that flowery Victorianism, something was seen in a wheat field by a man who works on the farm, was, disbelieved. And then a number of other men went out on a search for this thing, and some people actually saw it, including a number of school children. Now, there are a wealth of reports like this all across the UK and worldwide. I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys what you think about the possibility of a British Gug-Wose. And I'm excited to hear what you guys know about the Gugwe creature. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you'll join me for future episodes. I release content like this every week, and I'm sure I'll cover a topic you enjoy, so don't miss out. Hit that follow or like button. Please check out my YouTube and Patreon memberships for early or exclusive content, and you can find the link to them and my social media and donation sites in one handy link tree below. BBR is not funded, so any donation, no matter how small, is highly appreciated. So I will bid you adieu, and I will be back at the same time, the same day, with more from the BBR Case Files.